Gratitude. Let's talk about gratitude for a minute. As we see it, there's two distinct kinds of gratitude. The first is when life is good, and we intentionally, in these times, say, I'm so grateful for having this or having that. I'm just so blessed. So, although we're not going to spend much time on that part of gratitude right now, do not underrate the vital importance of this to our emotional and physical well-being. Catch yourself in moments when things are going good and just accentuate them by becoming aware and grateful for what we got. Our second kind of gratitude is a process that we apply to prevent and manage the times when we are melting down, though, due to an it's not fair, or it's an injustice, or many other of the situations that come to us. And these situations will come to us, for sure, we know that. But when these situations come, as we catch yourself in those moments, one of the first things we can do is reflect on something like this. Regardless of at least 90% of the misfortune, bad luck, and negativity that we have, that anyone has in our culture, we know for a fact that there's billions of people around the world today who would jump at the chance to have our misfortune, our bad luck, our negativity, that right now has turned us into a somewhat miserable, ungrateful, emotional state. Right? That's a really important reflection. Of course, you have to catch yourself in the moment to get it, but you can see how powerful it is. No one really disputes that. So let's build on the three big ones that we gave you in an earlier talk. At this moment, yes, this is awful, but relative to what? Number one, remember that golden rule basically? Number two, I'm so fortunate that this is not worse, because it could be, and then fill in the blanks, how? And number three, at least I have this, this, and this to be thankful for. Those are the three. So just a summary then on this gratitude, infusing every life moment that we can, the good, the bad, and the ugly, with gratitude, is an essential, meaningful motivator. We must really understand the power of perspective, context, and relativity of circumstances if we ever hope to find and sustain happiness as we're looking for. How about gratitude for difficult people who turn out to be special teachers? So I'm going to stretch your patience just a minute now. It's just going to take 2 or 3 minutes, but just see if there's any merit in this little reflection on a part of my life. See how it goes for you. I'll read from our book now. Every reader, I'm sure, can recall some of the most difficult people in your life, and maybe in some cases acknowledge how they, at one level, were a positive influence in your life, a mixed blessing, so to speak. Maybe being able to look for a little bit of gratitude here. I was in grade 2 when I was gifted to meet the first of one of my most memorable, difficult people in my life. Life was great. I'd been dropped into the best place on the planet. Apparently I was a likable kid and lots of friends. When I scored the odd goal in my budding hockey career, to the delight of my mom and dad, who attended most of my games, life seemed even better. My mom and dad had both come from homes where conflict was the norm, so they vowed never to argue in front of me or my 4 siblings. I never really saw conflict with them until I was about 16. To the best of my memory, and that of my siblings, my world was a benevolent place to live. About a dozen of my friends and I at school played baseball and soccer together, and occasionally would play wrestling with each other. One day coming home from school, about 10 of us decided to have one of our play wrestling matches on someone's lawn. Something like how kids decide to have a pickup game of baseball. For me, this was especially sweet because my girlfriend at the time was very impressed at how I pinned Billy, one of my best friends. I guess it was quite the sight for someone passing by because they called our teacher to report this gang-style fighting of us 8-year-old kids. He had all of us come to the music room to be scolded for this public display of violence. Before we could explain that we were just playing, the teacher started to yell at us and concluded by asking 2 of my friends to come to the front of the room. Like a moment in a horror story, he took out this big black piece of thick rubber, grabbed David, and started to strap his hands for what seemed like hours. David screamed and pleaded for him to stop, but he kept on strapping him. When he started to strap Billy, I wet myself. To this day, when I hear the sound like a horsewhip cracking, I can still be brought back to remembering that morning in the music room. Although he had threatened to strap all of us, he stopped after Billy with the promise that any more fighting and we would all be next. I lived in terror for the next 6 years, wondering if I would be next. I don't know if it happened immediately or over the next few months, as I was only 8 years old, but my fear became anger, seemingly at this injustice. Life was never the same for me again. In addition to my anger, around that time I developed a debilitating speech impediment that lasted until I was about age 25. Very soon I also started having asthma attacks and sick stomachs that prevented me from going to school. When I wasn't being sick or just pretending I was sick, I acted quite angry and even aggressive with many of my peers, to the extent that I never had a real friend until, that is, I went to high school. I got in many real fights, often sticking up for a younger kid being picked on by an older kid. I actually went looking for these fights. It felt good. I got the strap 2 times for my Don Quixote efforts, but unknowingly my anger kept my fears at bay, so it was well worth it. With adults such as teachers and my aunts and uncles, I kept my world from not getting out of control through acting pleasing, charming, and polite. I believe it was this special teacher that kick-started my passion for social justice, compassionate action, and forgiveness. My mom and dad's values and examples of helping others certainly built the essential foundation in my commitment. But motivation, I believe, was somehow strongly influenced by this deeply personal experience of vulnerably and helplessly watching this cruelty. It may seem like a stretch, but this incident still fuels my uncompromising efforts to stop the hurting of so many other Billies and Davids. Even as I watched my 2 big heroes of the day, the Lone Ranger and Roy Rogers, riding the countryside to stop the hurt of other Billies and Davids, I found that these heroes and their conquest had much more meaning. As a result of many positive life experiences and several excellent teachers, I not only had my anger for this teacher completely dissolve, but a deep understanding of and empathy for his PFP human predicament had started to emerge. With this gift, I was motivated to visit him in the hospital a few days before he died a painful death. I silently reflected in gratitude for this man's mixed blessings in my life. I especially credit my mindfulness practice to have made this visit happen with authentic compassion. Without knowing or intention, my fear for what I perceived to be a hostile world was made somewhat manageable by a combination of psychosomatic illnesses, pleasing adults, and anger depending on to who I was relating. To this day, when I meet or hear about a difficult person with a negative or bad attitude, an argumentative or angry spouse, a finger-wagging driver, a yelling teacher, or a power-driven supervisor, I can't help but think of how my anger and aggressive behavior in my teens and 20s so inaccurately showed others how I was really feeling. This opens my heart to those people today.